Namaskaram, Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. In this series, which is being done by MOPA, we are exploring the great composer Sri Muttuswami Dikshitar. There is nobody in the ethos of Indian classical music who is not aware of the primacy of his presence and his work. We are celebrating his 250th year at these times. Muttuswami Dikshitar comes as a shining star in a long lineage of scholars and musicians and Samskrita Panditas and Upasakas. From Venkatamakhi in the 1500s, through Muddu Venkatamakhi, who was his great-grandson, through Ramaswami Dikshitar, that is Muttuswami Dikshitar's father, and then of course Muttuswami Dikshitar, the brightest star. And then of course that tradition continues even through the 1900s. If I were to characterize or describe Muttuswami Dikshitar and how significant he is to Carnatic music, I would say that he is the greatest synthesis of all that is beautiful in Indian culture. I say this with a great amount of responsibility because this happens by the grace of Ishvara once probably in a millennium. Why do I consider Muttuswami Dikshitar as the greatest synthesis? Is because for him, even though we consider him to be a classical composer, a Vaggayakara, his compositions are the epitome of all that is there. Samasta Sampradaya is Muttuswami Dikshitar. Of course, they are musical compositions. So the Sangeeta Shastra is he's a patra of that. Then of course, his absolute mastery of Samskrita, which I am not in a position to evaluate at all, but I can sense that this is Samskrita in its most perfect form. Prosody, poetry, songwriting in its most perfect form. Sri Vidya Upasaka, the spiritual pursuit in its most perfect form. Philosophical, whether it be Advaita, Mimamsa, any of the philosophical traditions which have been over the past 2000 years, they come and get crystallized in Muttuswami Dikshitar's compositions. So there is the idea of Sampradaya, Kavita, Sangeeta, Adhyatma, all of these come together. And all of them in perfect forms. Nothing even, anything less than that. And his 500 odd compositions are the Pokkisham, we say in Tamil, are the treasure house of our culture. There is bhakti, there is jnana, there is all kinds of aspects of philosophy also, margas, everything he delineates through his compositions. In a time when we speak so much our art, in modern times, Dikshitar exists where his art speaks for everything. And that is why we celebrate him as an Avatara Purusha. In this series, we will be covering aspects, touching the tip of the icebergs of some of the aspects that we discover in his compositions. The aspects of raga, aspects of tala, aspects of synthesis, the syncretic, eclectic nature of the soul of Muttuswami Dikshitar. We have one section which speaks about his influence and borrowing and adaptation of Hindustani ragas, for example. So he's not just a South Indian synthesis. He belongs to the whole of Bharata Desha. Then we shall talk about his genius in terms of craft, musical craft. The Vivadi ragas that he handled, the Vakra ragas that he handled, 72 Mela ragas, Asampurna Melas, and the craft in handling that complexity and making it seem like child's play. Then we will go through his compositional structure, the Madhyama Kala sections of Kritis, which are a very important part of his contribution to the process of Kriti, the structure of Kriti. We shall go through his Vibhakti Kritis. Samskrita has the Vibhaktis, which are various ways in which you engage with the Lord. So we have the Guru Guha Vibhakti, we have the Tyagaraja Vibhakti, we have the Rama Vibhakti, Then we have all the cyclical compositions, the series compositions of the Navavarana, which is part of the Sri Vidya Upasana of Muttuswami Dikshitar. The Navagraha, again to do with the planets and their influence on civilization. And then we have his dear Ambal, the Shakti. He was a Shakti Upasaka. So you have the Navavarna, you have the Kamalamba Navavarna, you have the Nilotpalamba, Abhayamba, you have the Madhuramba. All these compositions we will cover. To an extent, only touching the tip of the iceberg, because that is what we can do at best. Generations to come will continue to discover and enjoy the compositions and understand them in better ways. That's how civilization moves. We shall look at some of his compositions which have become iconic in the ethos of Carnatic music. You know, compositions which have become the mainstay. One cannot imagine Carnatic music without a Vatapi Ganapatim Bhajeham, right? So to that extent, we talk about Billboard charts now, but here is a person whose composition has been topping the Billboard charts for 250 years or so. Correct? We rarely recognize that. We talk about Beatles, we talk about Michael Jackson, all those things, and how they have ruled the musical ecosystem. But look at Muttuswami Dikshitar. So effortlessly and so sahaja is his creation, is his work, that we are indeed blessed to dwell in them, to revel in them. So this series is going to be a reveling in the beauty of Muttuswami Dikshitar and his compositions. Hope you find the time and the space in your minds to participate and travel along with us in this very, very beautiful journey. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha.